The reunion, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase and Virgil!
Hey. How are you, man?
Good. You think wherever you want.
Grab a chair.
Yep.
Microphone.
There now.
I was hoping that Ted was going to have $100 bills to pay me off, but it didn't happen today. So...
Vince isn't here. Those were his $100 bills.
So let's talk about, to start it all off, when you got the $1 Million Man character in 1987, I think it was, how did it come about that you were hired to do that character? How did Vince come to you and pitch it? What was the original idea?
I was approached by the WWE. Vince brought me in. First, he said, I've got an idea for something that's never been done in wrestling. He says, so many things have been done and redone, but this is fresh and new. And I said, great. But he said, I can't tell you what it is until you agree to sign a contract with me. And he says, he really wasn't willing to really open up about it. He says, because if I tell you what it is, and then you decide not to come on board, I've given away a great idea. So I had to think about that. And the guy that I called, who has always been a mentor to me in professional wrestling, is Terry Funk. Terry Funk could do it all. Terry was a great technical wrestler. Terry could be as wild and crazy. He could do it all. And he always gave me great advice. And he said, Ted, he says, if Vince McMahon has something and he thinks it's tailor-made for you, he says, pack your bags, don't look back, go do it. So I called Vince and I said, okay, I'm your guy. What is it? He said, no, I'm not going to tell you on the phone. He says, I'm going to fly you back to New York. He says, bring your wife with you. And so he flies us both in New York. And then just from the get-go, you know, the first-class treatment, you know, limousine, the whole deal. And so he just kind of lays it out. He said, the one thing that everybody hates is someone who, by virtue of their wealth, thinks they're better than everybody. They basically bully people with their wealth. They think they can buy anybody or anything. I started laughing. I said, I can't stand guys like that myself. And he said, but what we want to do, he says, we're going to try to make the public believe you're really that guy. I said, how are you going to do that? He says, well, we're going to fly you everywhere, first class. He says, sometimes that'll mean private jets. He says, you're going to have a limousine service in every city, airport, hotel, coliseum, hotel, airport. Wherever the public sees you, they will see the appearance of wealth. And we're even going to give you what he called flash cash. I always had $2,000 in brand new $100 bills in my pocket. He said, now, here's what I want you to do. He says, now, if you abuse it, you lose it. He says, but for example, he says, go into a restaurant. You know, you got to pick your spot. Just get up and announce yourself to everybody. Say, hey, I'm Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man of what was the WWF then. And it's your lucky day because I'm picking up your tab. I have Virgil with me. Virgil go around and pick up all the checks. We'd add them all up. I'd slap down the brand new $100 bills. They gave me a receipt. I took the receipt to the office. They gave me more money. Wow. It was a tough job. Somebody had to do it, right?
Yeah. I mean, look what this man did for his art. He was willing to go in limousines and private jets. The trials and tribulations of being the $1 Million Man.
Well, it was surreal in a way. I mean, that day when it was over, and I got back in the limousine with my wife to go back into Manhattan. The office is in Stamford, Connecticut, and we're about 45 minutes from the city. So they had us a room at the Helmsley Palace, which is a plush hotel in New York. We had dinner reservations in one of the greatest seafood restaurants in town. and we had tickets to the theater that night. He said, I want you to go start living the life of the $1 Million Man. Tough job, somebody had to do it. It was kind of like, wow. And Vince does everything in a first-class way. But again, along with that comes a lot of responsibility as well. I have to produce. A lot of the things that we did in the beginning, even before I ever made my first appearance on television, we did all of those vignettes, so that people would see a vignette, every week from, I don't know, probably a month before I ever actually appeared in the Coliseum. But the one we did on TV, because after I was there, we started doing the events where I would offer people money to do a certain thing, and they never could quite do it right, and I wouldn't give them the money. But the one that I get asked about all the time is we were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and somebody said, well, what can we do tonight? And I said, well, what's Milwaukee famous for? And somebody said, beer and basketball. And I said, well, we can't do anything with beer, so what can we do with a basketball? Well, we found this little boy, this little black boy, 5 years old, maybe 6. And the deal was, and we rehearsed this, and that's what everybody doesn't know at the time. Those were all rehearsed. But the deal was, I get him to bounce the ball. He bounces the ball 10 times. I said, okay, kid, do that again 15 times without missing. You got $500. He gets to 14, and I stick my foot out and make the ball bounce off my foot. Oops, you didn't get the job done. And when you don't get the job done, you don't get the money. He's a little kid, right? It scared him. Crocodile tears. He ran to his mother. He couldn't have done it any better. And so I get in the back, and everybody's high-fiving. That was awesome. I said, I'm glad you're all happy. Now can you find an armored vehicle to get me out of the building? Because everybody wants to kill me. But to this day, I get asked about that. Now here's what's even funnier. I get asked so many times. I started saying, look, I said, that's 20-some years ago. That guy's a full-grown man now. He's probably going to walk up to me in some airport, tap me on the shoulder. I'm going to turn around. He'll be about 6'6" now, and he's going to go, remember me? Oh, and here's what's even better. It happened. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I'm originally from. I had a speaking engagement. I'm renting a car. This guy taps me on the shoulder. I turn around, I'm looking at his chest. Wow. He said, hey, Mr. DiBiase, he said, I'm the manager of the car rental. He said, can I help you find a car? I said, sure, let's find something that'll fit both of us. He said, I'll be happy to. He says, oh yeah, by the way, you remember that thing you did with the kid in the basketball? I went, no. He says, nice to see you again. Golly, what are the odds of that happening? And he said, you're going to like this. He says, I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. I said, see what I did for you, man?
Look what this man did for his art, ladies and gentlemen.
I said, you see? And he says, I said, well, were you any good? And he said, I actually got drafted by the Lakers. He says, but I didn't make the final cut. I said, well, obviously you're doing pretty good for yourself. You know what? And I got his phone number and lost it. If I could find that kid, he's not a kid now, he's a full-grown man. If I could find him, I know the WWE would do a story on him. Because then, years later, and actually somebody brought one to sign, all these action figures. Well, one of the action figures has a briefcase in it and a basketball. So that's how much the WWE hears about it. So if I could find that guy, we could do something with him.
If only we were in Nebraska.
There you go.
But I want to bring you in because when he gets this character, he's going to be the $1 Million Man, and you're his bodyguard. That was such an important part of it. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be and how you became part of the gimmick?
I became, I guess, the bodyguard, or whatever you want to call it at the time. You mean, like, I I got a call. I was down in Memphis, Tennessee with Jerry Lawler. And I called home, and I got a call from my parents, and they said, Vince McMahon called here. I looked to my mother and said, like, how could Vince McMahon could call you? And so I gave a call back to the office in Stamford, Connecticut, and Vince made a call. He talked to me on the phone. He said, yeah, like, when you can become available where I can fly you up to, it was Stamford, Connecticut. But I flew into LaGuardia Airport, and a limo was there, brought me up to Stamford, Connecticut. And when I came up to Stamford, Connecticut, that's where I met Ted right here. I said, man, I said, how you doing, man? He said, how are you doing? And,
yeah, the first time we ever met was in Vince's office. And, I mean, and you know, Vince hired Virgil. We'll tell everybody your real name, right?
Yeah.
But he had the look. I mean, you know, he has a chiseled body. You know, just the stern face. You know, he folded his arms, and he had the look. He just really had the look. And the deal with my character is, well, I was a bully.
Yeah.
And you never get tired of seeing a bully get his butt kicked. So I would always talk real big, and then when somebody would actually confront me, it's kind of like I step back and say, Virgil, take care of business.
And I'd be there.
The thing, you know, that was the kind of the deal. But at the same time, you know, he's taking care of me, but you know, I'm treating him like the maid, you know, the servant. He's carrying the bags, and that we did all that stuff in public. So everywhere people saw us in public, I mean, in the airport, I mean, he was getting paid good to do this job. So he would load the bags in the car and you know, all of that stuff. Now when we get to the hotel, you know, hey, you know, see you tomorrow, or see you when we go back to the arena. But anywhere in public we were seen as so the people bought into that. I mean, you talk about social media. I mean, word like that traveled. Like when word got around, we would do those things like with the money. That word spread like wildfire back then. So people bought into the character. They even went so far, Virgil, remember? Mm-hmm. We did a segment. You guys remember I don't know if it was over on TV over here, Lifestyles, the Rich and Famous?
Yeah, with Robin Leach.
With Robin Leach. We did a segment for that show. Well, it wasn't my house, it was Vince's house. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, they tried to do everything they could to make people believe that we were these characters, but go ahead.
It was very, very good when they showed Ted like this multi-millionaire, and we did the role so good, people believed everything about it, everything. People would see Ted still today, they want to try to get a $100 tip off him. Am I right or wrong? Am I right? You want a $100 tip, right? It ain't gonna happen.
Check's in the mail.
Yeah, the check is in the mail. When can we mail it? Amen.
So going on from that, I guess when you guys were together, one of the pinnacles of it would be in 1988 where you headlined WrestleMania with Randy Savage, and then you guys go on to SummerSlam and do the Mega Powers and the Mega Bucks. I mean, how was that for you guys that you have this act that's really over, you're getting a lot of, you know, people hate you and whatever, and then you get in the main event, you're working with Andre and Hogan and Savage, and you're one of the top acts in the company. So you guys are one of the top acts in the company. Like, you guys managed to build this to the main events of WrestleMania, SummerSlam.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, one of the things that Pat Patterson, who was Vince's right-hand man, one of the things he said was, to me, at the very beginning, he said, Ted, if Vince could be a character in his own show, he would be the $1 Million Man. he said, basically, it'd be like you being his alter ego, and so he said, no, that he's going to push this really hard. And that was it. I mean, the first time that wrestling was on live national television in the United States since the 1950s was an event called the Saturday Night Main Event, and the main event was it was a rematch between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant from WrestleMania III, where Hogan had beaten Andre and became the champ. They had not touched since that night. But the story was I had bragged that I'm going to prove to the world that I can buy anything, including the world title. I've hired Andre. He's going to beat Hogan, and he's going to sell me the championship. And so in that match, we pull a double referee stunt. The one referee goes, David Hebner goes down, and his identical twin, Earl, runs out to the ring, jumps in, counts Hogan's shoulders down when he wasn't, and gives him the title. So they let me carry the belt around for like 2 weeks.
My favorite part of that is when Hogan does the promo after the match and he said, "What about the plastic surgery?" As if someone had got surgery to look like Earl Hebner.
Right. And and so for about 2 weeks, wherever I went, I was introduced as the champion. And of course, then they go, well, you can't have the championship because you didn't really win it. And technically, they couldn't give it back to Hulk because technically he lost it. Andre wouldn't take it because he'd been paid off by me. So what do? You have a tournament to declare a new champion, and that was WrestleMania IV.
And I mean, what was that? What was WrestleMania IV like for you guys? Because you guys have been working so hard. You're working 300 days a year, and you get to be in the main event of WrestleMania.
That's pretty unbelievable. I mean, it was surreal because when WrestleMania III took place, I was working in two different places. I had a really good deal in Japan, and I was still working for what was then called Mid-South Wrestling, which was promoted by Bill Watts. I remember picking the paper up the day after WrestleMania III and seeing the headline, WrestleMania sets indoor attendance world record. And as soon as I saw that, I knew if I'm going to stay relative in the wrestling business, then I have to be there. And I was getting ready to make a trip to Japan, and Bruce Pritchard, who you all know as Brother Love, was going to New York to interview for a job. And Bruce and I were friends. And I said, I was up there once before, they know me. I said, throw my name out and see if anybody's interested. So I get a call in Japan from Bruce. And he said, Ted, he said, they're not just a little interested, they're real interested. He said, here's what's happened. While you're in Japan, Bill Watts has sold Mid-South Wrestling to Jim Crockett, who was the owner of the wrestling promotion out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And so when I went back to Mid-South, it was under new management. But that's how it all started. So think about that. I'm not even a part of the WWF at WrestleMania III. I'm not on the scene. But the next month, I have the interview, and by June, I'm now wrestling for the WWF as this character, the $1 Million Man. And the first night that wrestling is on live network television in the United States since the 50s, I'm an integral part of the main event. It's pretty surreal. I mean, you talk about things happening fast. And then to, basically main event WrestleMania IV. I never in my wildest dream, on that day when I said, I need to be there, I had no idea that a year later I would be headlining the main event. So it was pretty fast.
Someone's name who's come up a couple of times today is Andre the Giant. Do you have any Andre stories that you could tell people?
Well, I will tell this story, and everybody's going to love it. It's in my book. It's my favorite Andre story. HBO did a documentary about Andre, and they did a very good job of showing people just how lonely a life Andre really lived. Because when you're that big, you can't hide anywhere. You're constantly looking for a place to be comfortable because there's no furniture made for you anywhere. So even like when he'd go to Japan, they'd have to get him like a king room and sometimes put 2 beds together. Just unbelievable stuff. But I ended up traveling with Andre for almost a year after WrestleMania IV. So Andre and I would wrestle Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan and whoever. And so I got to spend a lot of time with I call him the boss. Well, this one trip, we have to fly to Tokyo. The whole company's going. Now, from just about anywhere in the United States to Tokyo is a 14-hour flight. That's a long time on an airplane. Now understand, Andre is 7'4", 450 pounds. He can't get in the bathroom on the airplane. He can't even get in it. So he would have to empty his body before he ever got on the plane. And then, of course, if he has to urinate, they would take him to the back of the plane and they'd hold up a blanket and he would stand behind the blanket and go in a cup. I mean, people don't think about things like that. So Andre, you know, here's a guy, he's always looking to get comfortable somewhere. Even sitting in a first class seat on an airplane, he can sit there, but is he really comfortable? No. Anyway, 14-hour trip, then another hour on the bus into Tokyo. And we all drop our bags and we're gonna go out and get something to eat. The first night you try to stay awake as late as you can so you're not, you know, falling asleep at 2 o'clock the next afternoon. So I hit the button on the elevator. The door opens and Andre's on the elevator. We're going down to meet everybody in the lobby. Door shuts. This elevator stops on virtually every floor. And folks, I mean, the whole country of Japan is about the size of the state of California. Only 1/4 of that landmass is inhabitable. 3/4 of Japan is rugged, uninhabitable mountains. But the population of Japan is about half that of the USA. So you got half the population of the United States living in an area about 1/4 of California. That's stacking them up. So, I mean, they even pay people at the train station. And those people are paid to push people on the train to make sure that each car is packed. So what you and I would consider this elevator is full, wait for the next one, not in Japan. So every floor they keep getting on. You know, Andre's been on the airplane, the whole deal, and they keep getting on. So finally the door shuts. He taps me on the shoulder and I looked up at him and he winked at me. I said, okay, something gonna happen. Well, folks, the next thing I heard was the loudest, longest fart that I have ever heard in my entire life. Now, gang, I'm telling you, I'm staring straight ahead, biting a hole in my lip, and I kept thinking, I said, I know it's the Giant, but how could anybody possibly have this much air in their body? And all I could picture was the poor little Japanese guy that's standing directly behind Andre, who is, I mean, he's only 5 feet tall, so you know where he's at. He's right in he's target. He's the bullseye. I could almost see his hair going. But when that elevator door opened, it was like the Exodus. They were tripping over each other trying to get out, and all I could hear was all that Japanese jabber, and I know they were cussing the big guy. And everybody got off, except me and Andre. And as the door closed, Andre goes, I guess they won't crowd the big man anymore, will they? And all you could hear was, you had to be there to appreciate it. But that's my favorite Andre story.
We're gonna take some fan questions in just a minute, but before we do, you guys were together from like '87 to '91, and then you do the storyline where you guys break up, and it all leads to SummerSlam where you win the $1 Million belt. Was it just time, do you think, for you guys to kind of go off and do your own thing? And what are your memories of kind of that breakup storyline?
What was that again?
When you guys broke up in 1991 and you went as a singles wrestler, as a good guy, you beat him for the $1 Million belt at SummerSlam.
I mean, he's the best teacher in the world right here, you mean? He taught me everything that you can know in pro wrestling, you mean? Everything. From punches to telling a story, the whole 9 yards, okay? He is one of the best, if not the best, okay?
Well, the thing about that, thank you. The thing about this whole thing was from the very beginning, when we first met, Vince told us, we're going to do this, but at some point down the road, Virgil is going to get tired of all your crap, and and make the turn. And I still remember that. Then I think we were in Philadelphia. And and so when he picked that belt up and hit me in the head, I mean, the entire place exploded. Yeah. And he was an instant baby face, as we say, a good guy. And that was the lead in to us having a match at WrestleMania 7. And that kind of segued into something that I would have then with Roddy Piper, because Roddy was at ringside with Virgil. And so we had a good little run there. But I mean, yeah, the plans for the breakup, were in the works from the very beginning. So it wasn't like we decided there was a time. I guess the time was the time was decided by the front office.
Okay, we're going to open up to any questions that you got for Ted DiBiase or Virgil. Got your hand up if you have one. Gentleman here.
This is a question for Virgil. Virgil, what's your most memorable match you've had as a wrestler?
The most memorable match as a wrestler, it was wrestling Ted DiBiase. That's the most memorable. That's the best. When you go against the best, you get better and better and better. Am I right or wrong?
Okay, any other questions? Just put your hand up.
I coached him.
Hi, Ted. What was the worst thing that you ever made anybody do for money?
What was the worst thing I ever made anybody do for money?
This could go so many ways.
Well, and we would probably kissing my feet.
Yeah.
And you know who did that? Rob Van Dam.
Yep. Where's he at?
Yeah. I told Rob, and I didn't see him, I mean, he was a kid in Grand Rapids, Michigan when we did that with him. And he got in the ring and took the money and did the deal. And so I didn't see him, and all of a sudden then he becomes a professional wrestler and becomes a top guy. I didn't see him for years, and so when I first saw him the next time, I said, hey, Rob, I said, you know what? I've got another foot. I said, you want to go for two? You never know where it'll take you.
Puck her up.
Yeah, he's a great guy. But yeah, that was probably it. I mean, we had people bark like dogs, and or it's like of something else. Like I'm chewing gum, and I'd spit the gum on the mat and say, "Okay, I'll give you $300 if you push that gum that I just spit out across the ring with your nose." And people would do it. I mean, everybody's got a price. And in the live events, we would actually, every night at the live events, we would do it, and it was organic. It wasn't staged. I would actually pick somebody from the crowd, but they always got the money. One thing we did, now this is something me and Piper did. we did a deal where I get introduced, and Piper gets in the ring, and I said, I don't really feel like wrestling tonight. And Piper, you don't want to be embarrassed by me. And, if this happens, that I'm going to beat you and embarrass you. I said, so here's $300. Why don't you go out and have a good time, and we'll just call it a day. What do you say? And he looks at me, and then he looks at the people, and I look around like this, like, I got him. And when I turn back, he nails me. And the money flies up out of my hand. He grabs the money, and he rolls out of the ring. And, instead of having three $100 bills, I had a bunch of 20s. So he could give more people money. And he runs around the ring, and he gives people, here's 20, 20, 20. So by the time I bit back to my feet, he's given all my money away. That seemed to get over every night. You can't get in trouble giving away money. But we had a lot of fun with it.
Okay, Ted, have you got any stories about the $1 million belt? Did it ever go missing? Did it ever get left behind, and did it ever get lost?
We flew into Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia.
And, and again, the deal was, well, when we go to baggage claim, sit the bags down. The deal was, that's what we did in public. Virgil was not my servant, but in public, he appeared to be. So he would load the bags and then load them in the car and all that stuff. So, but I would always I carried the belt in a Halliburton briefcase. They kind of made a ring box out of it. So we go to baggage claim, and I set the briefcase down by our luggage, and I'm talking to somebody, and now we load up, and we go to the downtown Marriott in Atlanta and unpack the bags, and we're going to get ready to go to our rooms. I said, Virgil, where's the belt? He says, you have it. I said, no, you were supposed to load it in with the luggage. He said, well, no, you always carry it. So we look at each other, it's like deer in the headlights, like, oh no. So I told that limo driver, I said, you get back to the Atlanta airport as fast as you can. He says, and I don't care if a cop comes after you, I'll pay him too. So we go back to the Atlanta airport, and I go to the carousel. It's not there. So I go to Delta baggage claim, and I said, you didn't happen to find a Halliburton briefcase over there at Carousel 6 or whatever it was. And the guy reaches down and he picks it up and he sets it there and he goes, pal, you have no idea how lucky you are that this is still here on a Friday night, as busy as our airport is. A briefcase sitting there unattended to is like an invitation. So I sat it down and opened it up and flipped it around. I said, you have no idea how lucky I am that briefcase is still here. And he looked at that and went, oh my God. But actually, he said something other than that. Almost like holy. But yeah, that's the closest that we came to losing it. But oh my gosh. And again, I get asked about the belt all the time. The belt that was made, and it was made by, I guess this guy in Greenwich, Connecticut is a world-known gemologist. And so they put this belt together. All the stones in the face of the belt are what you call a cubic zirconium. And I said, what's that? And they said, well, it's almost a diamond. And I'm really not sure what that means either. So it's valuable, but not as valuable as a diamond. But there's 700 of them in the face of the belt, and that's at $50 a piece. Well, do the math. That's 35 grand. And then it's not solid gold. If it were solid gold, it would be so heavy I couldn't wear it. But it had like gold plate. But in 1988, when it was made, and anytime when we came over here, I had to go through customs in another country, I had to carry a declaration page, and its declared value in 1988 was $40,000. Its declared value today is $200,000. So it's not totally real. And here's the joke. On the back of the belt are 3 real diamonds. And when I saw those, I went, what's that? They said, those are real diamonds. And I said, why? He says, well, when anybody asks you, are the diamonds real, you can say yes and you won't be lying. Kind of a joke. So anyway, people always ask about the belt. So, and they go, oh, aren't you, don't you wish that you would have, had the opportunity to be the WWF World Champion? I go, well, yeah, I mean, everybody would like to have that opportunity. And in reality, the initial thought for WrestleMania IV was that somehow that would happen. But if you're what we call a heel champion, a bad guy champion, you're a transitional champion. You're not going to be that champion long. You're either going to drop it back to who you lost it, who you won it from, or you're going to be a transitional champion where you drop it to the next good guy who's going to be the champion. So the idea about the $1 million belt was basically Pat Patterson. And he told me, he said, Ted, he says, let's say that you don't win at WrestleMania, and in your arrogance, just declare yourself a champion and make your own belt. And as soon as he said it, I said, let's do that. And so I got more heat over the years and made more money, carrying around the $1 million title than I ever would. So it worked out pretty good.
We do one last question. Anybody else got a question?
I was just going to ask you, I remember you as a heel manager. You used to be awesome as a heel manager, like sort of Bigelow and Tatanka. Have you ever thought about doing that nowadays or coming back? I mean, I can really imagine you with like the likes of Cesaro or somebody who, a lot of them at the moment need a mouthpiece, and you'd be that perfect person.
Well, I appreciate that, but number one, I grew up in the wrestling business. My love for wrestling started with my stepfather, Mike DiBiase, who raised me. And then I wrestled physically for 19 years. And then I continued as a manager and a commentator for another 6 years. So I put in 25 years of my life into wrestling, and I love it. And I love to come to events like this because I get to meet a lot of you, and I get to hear a lot of your stories. And I've always said this, I think wrestling fans are some of the greatest fans in the world because they're so loyal. But I had my run. I mean, everybody always said that. Well, now, okay, I'm 65 years old. I've had both of my knees replaced. I've had 2 operations on my neck to replace discs. And, I don't have any other ailments. All of my other parts are, the doctor said, I had a fainting spell and I had all these tests running. The doctor said, Ted, I don't know what's going to kill you, but it won't be a heart attack. You got the arteries of a 20-year-old kid. And I said, well, I appreciate that, doc. I said, but I got a pretty good cardio workout every night of my life until I was almost 40. So I don't want to push it. It's like, my boys all tried it. Ted Jr. was doing great, but he figured out what I tried to tell him. I loved what I did. I loved getting in this ring and entertaining you. I loved that. But all that goes along with that is not so cool. I spent hours away from my family. I wrote a book about it. Almost lost my family because I was gone so much and other things. So much I wrote a book about it. But my love for the business won't ever change. But, it's time to go on. People keep going, one more match. And my answer to that is, everybody's got a price.
Give it up one more time for the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase and Virgil!